Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Bengal Tiger Podcast. I'm Matthew Brune, and joining me today is Zach Abolverdi, covers Florida for On3 at Gators Online. Zach, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, man. We're inching closer to SEC Media Days and talking season, so it's exciting, man.
Yes. Um, yeah, Florida, LSU. We don't know if in 2024 and beyond if the rivalry they're going to hold together. Everybody's like LSU is just going to have A&M. Whenever they flip it to that, and then after that, the schedule will probably go to 9 games at some point.
Sure.
So we'll probably see LSU, Florida, in some rivalry capacity again. But still, play every single year for Florida and LSU. I've only been here for 2 years now, but it was the 2021 game in Baton Rouge was my first real experience at Tiger Stadium, where Ty Davis Price rushed for like a billion yards, and LSU somehow won that game. Um,
That was
with
the
like, I mean,
Anthony Richardson coming out performance.
yeah, and it was just a very interesting game where a lot was happening at that time, and I was
Yep,
kind of
no
overwhelmed.
doubt.
But still, um, so then you get Billy Napier in 2022 season, first year, 6-7 overall. Just how would you summarize that first year under Billy Napier with everything that all the challenges that he had, everything he kind of had to do in year one?
Yeah, I mean it was an up and down season that I think a lot of people going into it knew there was the capacity for. And then they come out week one and beat number 7 Utah, and I think that probably set the expectations a little bit too high than where the program was at and where the roster was at. They clearly had talent. You can see that in some of the games that they were in, some of the games that they won, and then even in the NFL draft with some of the guys that got picked. But uh, top to bottom, overall, as the season played out, you could see that once the SEC slate took its toll and they started playing some of the better teams in the conference, that Florida just wasn't where they needed to be. And it's been a roster rehaul for Billy. I just wrote the latest numbers in a story the other day. They had 35 total departures from their 2022 roster, and that includes the 6 draft picks that they had. But 35 total. That includes seniors that left, transfers, um, everything. And somehow they replaced that attrition with 36 guys via the high school recruiting ranks and the transfer ranks. 2 guys JUCO, but 22 that they brought in as high school recruits, and then 14 total transfers. So it was needed because if you just looked at where they were at last season, it was clear, and like I said, in some of the better opponents that they played, that there needed to be some upgrades on both sides of the ball. And are they there yet? No, but I think that they took probably a good step in the right direction this offseason.
Yeah, I wanted to ask about kind of the challenge that this is for Napier and the staff, coming off of what Dan Mullen did and maybe the shortcomings that he had, whether it's on the recruiting trail or just in general. I don't think people understand how much of a rebuild that this is, like a complete overhaul rebuild. And
Yeah.
as we mentioned, I mean, not only in the back end, but also now losing Richardson, Dexter, Torrance, guys like that. Like, how much of a rebuild is this?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's multifaceted because it's not just it's not just, I think, from a talent standpoint. I think that's number one, obviously, but the culture had to be changed. The whole operation had to be changed in terms of how they do things from a team standpoint, from a recruiting standpoint, the staffing that's taken place. It was a complete change in the organization. In a way, it was almost like a blessing that they had the Heavener Center kind of open up this brand new, $86 million facility that kind of came about after the coaching change, because it was a good way for them to just kind of reset everything. The staff was able to have some input on the new building, and then kind of have a place where they could put their operation, in motion. And I think just based on how the offseason has gone, some of the stuff that I've observed and heard, things are in a much better place just from that standpoint. And I think that, Dan Mullen did a lot of great things at Florida. And he was a great coach and a great X's and O's play caller. I think that one clear knock on him is just not having the structure in place for his program. I think from a staffing standpoint, from a culture standpoint, and I think that his standards coming from Mississippi State and his exposure and being there for so long, just a lot different than what Billy was exposed to coming up, being at Alabama, being at Clemson, getting exposed to guys like Dabo and Nick. It's just different, and I think that is reflective in how he runs his program. Now, is that going to lead to a better result on Saturday? We're going to find out. But that kind of just speaks to how much they've had to really build a new foundation and start from scratch.
Yeah. Now, looking at this year's team, I want to start on offense. Graham Mertz at quarterback, the return Montrell Johnson. Last year offense was so run heavy, but it was one of the best rushing offenses in the country. Do you expect it to look the same? Do you expect it to be similar type of balance between running and passing? Obviously, Anthony Richardson, not a quarterback, kind of changes that, but just what are your overall expectations of this offense?
Yeah, I think first of all, from a passing standpoint, I think the goal for Graham Mertz, who I expect to be the starter, will be to try at the very least to produce numbers that were similar to Anthony, if not better in some categories. I don't know if he's going to throw for as many yards as Anthony did. I think Anthony was right around 2,600. And Graham Mertz threw for right under 2,200 last season, which was a career high for him. But in terms of the touchdowns and the interceptions, I think Anthony only finished with 17, last season. And I think he only threw for, gosh, I can't remember the number. I want to say it was only like 4 picks or something like that in the last however many games. So he had a really good stretch, but I think he had 8 for the season. So when you look at Graham Mertz, the big knock on him has been, or I guess the concern, should I say, is his history with turning over the ball and specifically throwing interceptions. And that stems from his 2021 season where he had 10 touchdown passes and 11 picks, those are not good numbers. To his credit, the next season, which was this past year in 2022, he went from 10 touchdowns and 11 interceptions to 19 touchdowns and 10 picks. So he pretty much doubled his number of touchdowns that he threw, and he brought his interceptions down at least one. I think the goal for him would be if he can get into single-digit territory with interceptions and then throw for 20 touchdowns. If he could do that at Florida, that would be great. That'd be more than what Anthony had last year. And then, again, he had under 2,200 yards. If he can surpass that, get close to 2,500, that would be enough, more than enough, I think, passing production from him so that Florida can run what I expect it to be, which is going to still be a run-heavy offense. And I think, to your point, we saw Montrell Johnson and Trevor Etienne and how much they were featured last year as a duo. I think you're going to see even more from those guys. I've wrote this before. I think that they're going to become the first running backs in school history to both eclipse 800 yards in a single season. I think that's coming. So they were close last year to doing it. I think that those guys are still going to be the focal point, but Graham is still going to have to produce in the passing game. And I think that they are going to have a better receiving corps than I think people expect, because Ricky Pearsall is obviously the lone returning starter, and he's kind of the stud at that spot. And I think PFF has him graded as the 3rd highest returning receiver in the league. So, but there's a lot of unknowns behind him. I think that Billy Gonzalez being back as a receivers coach, who's His track record is pretty extensive and impressive. I think that he's going to turn Pearsall into a stud, and I think he's going to raise the level of that receiver room. But specifically, I think that the three freshman receivers that they brought in are going to maybe be difference makers and give this offense a little bit more playmaking ability than they had maybe last season, and more weapons. So I'm excited to see how it plays out because I think they're going to be run heavy. I think they're going to be a run first offense, but I said all that stuff at the beginning. I think Graham is more than capable of producing enough in the passing game to be close to what Richardson was. Now, he's not going to be close to what Richardson was in the running game.
No, I don't think so.
And not even at all. So that's the difference, and that's where Montrell Johnson, Trevor Etienne, and Cam Carroll are going to probably have to have a little bit more that they carry on their shoulders in terms of a workload.
On defense, Florida Napier brings in a new defensive coordinator with Austin Armstrong from Southern Miss. I had went on a run. I did every single opponent for LSU this year. I did a full preview, like 1,000 words on all of them, and so I was able to look at them, and I forgot how poorly Florida rated defensively last year. It was I mean, obviously you watch the games, but then it's like you get caught up in the Florida State game, and then you really look back on it. It's like, oh yeah, Florida State, 45 points. It stacks up. The LSU game, for instance, it's like stacks up. So I didn't realize how bad it was last year. But now, new defensive coordinator. Is this a complete overhaul schematically, personnel wise, or because obviously, like I said, losing the draft picks that they lost, I think is substantial. But just what do you expect to see, and what have you seen so far as the defense goes?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the draft picks. I think that you're right. Especially, the highest one on defense was Gervon Dexter, who will be difficult to replace had it not been for the transfers. But I think more importantly, you lost both of your inside linebackers who got drafted, in Ventrell Miller and Amari Burney. Like, those guys were veterans, senior leaders, had been through multiple defenses, multiple staffs, like so much value in those two guys running your defense and making the calls. So that to me is a big question mark. Now, they got a lot of players at that position. I think Shamar James is definitely going to be one of those starters. And then they've got some veterans and one of those transfers from Ohio State, Chiraja Mitchell, that I think will probably be the other one. But there is some question marks there. They basically lost all of their starters in the secondary, except for Jason Marshall. Now they get Jaden Hill back, but he's switched to a different position, and the position he switched to, nickel, at least in the spring, he was working as the backup. So, now Jason Marshall, they're bringing SEC Media Days. I think he's got a chance to have a really special year as a junior, but they're replacing their starting safeties, both of them. They're replacing their nickel. There's going to be a battle for that other cornerback spot because Jaden Hill has moved. So there's a lot of newness there. And then up front, you lost Gervon Dexter. But, their front seven has a chance to I think be a deeper perhaps this season, just because of what they've been able to add from the high school ranks and then from the transfer portal. Like Caleb Banks and Cam Jackson are going to be dudes in the interior of the defensive line. Both of them are probably going to start as transfers. And then, Florida brought in several guys, I think, at inside linebacker that you could see make an impact. But to go back to where you started, which was Austin Armstrong, I think what's fortunate for Florida is being able to find him given the circumstances of Patrick Toney's exit. He literally leaves like a week before spring football starts. And
he didn't put in his 2 weeks.
Yeah. I mean, I think they knew it was coming because Billy made a hire, as soon as it was done. It might not have been a week. Maybe it was 2 weeks out. But point is, it was right before spring ball. And, any head coach that you put in that situation, that's a tough ask to then go hire a defensive coordinator. And in most scenarios, with all those factors in play, you're probably not going to be able to get a guy that was running the same scheme as the other guy unless you promote.
I was gonna say, or you just promote.
Yeah, but if you go make a hire, you're probably now bringing somebody in, if you can get them in for spring ball, that is now going to install a brand new scheme instead of all your players learning year 2 of Patrick Toney's system. So like that, the potential for that was catastrophic. And what happens? They go out and hire Austin Armstrong, who literally coached and came up under Billy Napier and Patrick Toney at Louisiana. Then, oh, by the way, went to Georgia for a year to learn from Kirby Smart, then comes back to Louisiana with Patrick Toney and Billy as a linebackers coach, then goes and calls plays at Southern Miss for 2 years as the DC, and then gets hired by Nick Saban. That pedigree and that background and that history is pretty appealing for a lot of reasons. So I don't think Billy could have had this work out really any better. Just in terms of like the tough spot that he was in, having to replace his DC. Now then on top of that, we will find out how Austin Armstrong does as a play caller, right? But just in terms of his impact on the players in his first spring and his job coaching them in practice and interacting with them off the field, he was a huge hit. And I think was a welcome change from Patrick Toney, who was by no means disliked by the players. I know several guys that loved him, but he was a laid back coach. His demeanor was much different than Austin Armstrong, who is high energy, enthusiastic, just a different dude. And I think that the players have just loved the guy. And it's from a personality standpoint, he fits in at Florida better than Patrick does. Now, whether or not if he goes out there and doesn't call great defenses on Saturday, that won't matter. But I think he's going to, just given his pedigree.
We've talked about a few transfers already along the defensive line, at receiver, obviously Graham Mertz at quarterback. Are there any others that you're interested to watch this year? Maybe that, we haven't talked about enough, or just generally that you're interested to watch?
Yeah, I mean, obviously Graham is their season is going to hinge on how well he does. I think. And then obviously along the offensive line, Micah Mazuka was their number 1 rated transfer that they got according to the On3 transfer portal player rankings. I think it was 175th nationally. They signed 7 transfers in the top 275. But he was the highest one that they signed. And he went through a shoulder surgery in the offseason, but they expect him to be good to go this season and for the opener. So he's going to be basically replacing Osiris Torrance, who was, the All-American who got a brick and spent 1 season here after transferring over from Louisiana. So he's got big shoes to fill, but he was also, one of the best guards in the Pac-12. So I think that he's got a chance to come in and make an immediate impact. And then, they moved Austin Barber over from right to left tackle because, they lost Richard Garage. So now they got a battle at the right tackle spot between 2 SEC transfers and Damian George and Keontae Goodwin, a former 5-star who signed with Kentucky. So you feel good about that spot. Those 2 guys duking it out, a guy that started for Alabama and then a 5-star recruit. So those are some impact transfers. I think one other guy worth mentioning, I mentioned the linebackers. I think Mitchell will probably be the guy that you see the most from Florida. But then at safety, I mean, you can't go without mentioning RJ Moten from Michigan, who was a critical get for the staff. Billy basically openly said, we got to go get a transfer portal player after spring ball at safety. Yeah. And then he went and did it. And he went and got a starter from Michigan. When you think about that defense and the season that they had making to the college football playoff, I mean, that's an impressive get. And we'll see how he fits in. But man, I think he's going to immediately start, and how great it is for them, because had they not landed him, or anybody else that fit that profile of a veteran Power 5 starter, they're going to be rolling out there with two true sophomores as their starting safeties. And that's not a great ideal position to be in defensively. So now you'll have a veteran back there in RJ, and now just one of those sophomores starting and the other one rotating regularly. But that's a much better place to be in on the back end.
And then I wanted to ask you if there was an X factor position unit this year, kind of in a sense of if this team reaches its potential or maybe exceeds its potential, that it could kind of flip things. Whereas if it doesn't reach its potential, we could be looking at things a little different. Just from listening to you, I feel like maybe defensive line could be one just because of the transfers additions. But what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think Cam Jackson has a chance to be one of Florida's best players on defense.
Okay.
So at nose tackle, the Memphis transfer. So I think that you plug him in there, and that raises the bar, because you still got Desmond Watson there as well. Both of them are going to play nose, and they're going to be both. Good luck trying to block those guys. Imagine they put them on the field at the same time. But I think Jackson is going to, I think, raise the bar there on the defensive line. And then Caleb Banks, I wouldn't put him as X factor, but he's almost equally as important, because he's the guy that's replacing Javon Dexter. And, that, the role that Javon played on that defensive line, and how talented he was, and blocks that he took on, and assignments that he was given, those are big shoes to fill as well. So, and then I know what I'm going to get out of Florida's running backs, right? I have a sense for what I'm going to get out of Florida's offensive line, even the transfers. I don't know what I'm gonna get out of Graham Mertz. I think that he is going to perform better than maybe people expect, but is it going to be good enough for Florida to maybe have a better season or a better record than they're getting projected right now? That remains to be seen. But in a way, from that sense, I feel like he could be an X factor, but not necessarily be one of their most important players on offense, or like a weapon. But if he operates that thing well, and is able to make plays when his numbers is called, but more importantly, just run it like a now fourth-year Power 5 starter, and get the offense out of bad looks, make the right reads at the line of scrimmage, make the easy check, dump down throws that I think early in the season sometimes Anthony Richardson even missed as a first-year starter. There's the potential there that he can just do his job well enough, and Florida is just humming on the ground, that they could have a pretty good offensive attack. And then I think, the other one defensively, Cam Jackson, I think has to be a force in the middle. If he's not, like you said, that could affect how well Florida is defensively. But also at inside linebacker, as I mentioned that earlier, whoever those two guys are that really stand out as the alpha dogs, those two are going to be able to have the same type of impact defensively that Ventrell Miller and Amari Burney had. I think Shamar James is ready to do it, and I think he's talented enough. That's one of the highest rated recruits that Florida has signed on this team. They beat Alabama and Georgia for him. So he's got to have to be one of those guys. But again, we'll see if they can measure up to Ventrell and Amari, because those dudes had really good years last year, and that's why they got picked in the draft.
Yeah. All right, we can wrap it up. Looking at this season kind of as a whole right now, just looking at the schedule, I mean, right before the season starts, 5 top 15 teams on the schedule. I mean, and it's spread out too. It's just Utah, Tennessee, Georgia, LSU, Florida State all on the schedule. And then that doesn't even include South Carolina, Arkansas, Kentucky, who are going to be fine, good teams again. This is one of the more challenging schedules I've seen. That's 8 really tough games right there. And it's a Florida team that's obviously rebuilding, but like you said, has a lot of talent on it with its transfers. I think if they make a bowl game, I mean that's pretty impressive from
Yeah.
there. I mean, and then you go from there. Obviously, we'll see what the bowl game is, but in theory, you make a bowl game, you play the bowl game because bowl games are crapshoots a little bit. If you can go 7-6, we're looking at a real positive swing for Billy Napier's team. I think what did Vegas have the win total at 5.5 right now?
Yeah, they got him at 5.5.
I
You
think
know,
6 is
to me there's some fact, and I wrote this for our SEC Media Days preview and some storylines to follow here. And the last one was, can the Gators just be a better team this year? I think that ultimately that's what everybody wants to know. Nobody expects them to, win the SEC or even win the East. But, the bar is not too high in terms of being able to improve on, because you're talking about back-to-back 6 and 7 seasons that they're coming off of. One of those was not Billy's. But last season, they didn't beat any of their rivals. So, in and it's going to be tough to beat them again this season because they're among the teams that are ranked that you refer to. So, to me, I think there's some criteria there. And to me, it starts with the win-loss total. Like you've been 6 and 7 the last 2 years. At the very least, you have to flip those numbers. At the very least. Like now, if he goes 6 and 7 again, is at the end of the world. Like he's not going to get fired. But nobody's going to be happy. So like at the very least, with a tough schedule, you got to be able to flip that. And if you go 7 and 6, already there you're winning.
Yeah.
Because that means you probably went. You either went 6 and 6 and and then you won your bowl game, or you went 7 and 5 and then you lost your bowl game. But regardless, if you finish 7 and 6, like you're already doing better than Vegas projected you. And so that's the start. I think they cannot have another losing record. Like that's just maybe, and then if they finish 6 and 6, like it's going to be critical that they win that bowl game. They haven't won a bowl game since 2019. But even more important than the bowl game, like they could lose the bowl game, they need to beat one of their rivals. I think that is going to matter to fans, and it should.
Florida State, LSU, Georgia.
Florida State, LSU, Georgia, and Tennessee. Don't forget Tennessee, because to me that's the game that they got to win. I did 5 must-win games for Florida this season that I kind of characterize as that I felt like they had to win for just so that they can have the record that they want to have, for perception, to please fans. And to me, Tennessee is one of those games. I don't know if you know this. Tennessee has not won in the Swamp, and they play every year. Tennessee has not won in the Swamp. When do you think the last time they won?
Oh God, was Peyton Manning the quarterback? I don't know.
No, it was a little bit after that, but 2003.
Close.
It's been 2 decades since they won in the Swamp. So now, granted, Florida dominated. They had that long winning streak against Tennessee. It got broken in 2016 in Knoxville. But the Gators have not lost at home since 2003, which was the Ron Zook years. So now Tennessee's coming in hot. Their coach is great, and they had a great season last year. But they did lose their quarterback, and they did lose some key pieces. And Joe Milton is going to be coming into his first SEC road start of the season early in the year.
3.
Yeah, week 3. Like, to me, that is the game they have to win, because they go on the road at Kentucky, and I put that as a must-win game, because then if they lose that game, that'd be three years in a row that they've lost the Wildcats, which is crazy.
Ooh.
But I mean, I feel like if you had to lose one, as ugly as that sounds, I feel like fans can stomach losing on the road more than they will take. Like Kentucky's not a rival. Like, you got to beat Tennessee at home, defend your home turf, defend that streak that you got against them. And I think that game can be the difference in whether Florida finishes with 7 wins. But I will say I like their chances against a lot of the other teams. Like I think that they can beat South Carolina on the road. Like they beat them handily in the Swamp last year. Granted, they had Richardson, and that was one of his better games. And
Arkansas at home.
and I think they got to beat Arkansas at home because they're bringing out the black jerseys. They're bringing out the black unis, man. Like you cannot bring out those uniforms and lose that game. I'm sorry.
To
Yeah,
death at
well,
that point.
I don't know if you remember the swamp green uniforms that they wore against Texas A&M the week before they played LSU, and that was the year McElwain got fired, and those were forever banned. So I don't want to see them ban the black unis, which I'm excited for. So. But that's going to be a hard one, man. I think Arkansas, I think they got the best quarterback running back combo in the SEC with KJ Jefferson and Rocket Sanders. That's tough to top. I mean, LSU might have an argument.
No, they don't. LSU doesn't have the running back.
Yeah, so I think that's a special combo. That's going to be a tough team to beat. So we'll see how it plays out. But again, I think to circle back, at the very least, flip their record and go 7-6. And hey, man, if you get to 8 wins, however you get there, whether it's with the bowl or if you go 8-4 during the regular season, like I think a lot of people would be happy. And I don't think that it's. I think if they beat Tennessee and they went on the road at Kentucky, they can win 8 games.
We'll know early on. It's Utah,
absolutely.
McNeese, Tennessee, Charlotte, Kentucky, Vanderbilt, South Carolina. Like that's the first 7 games right there.
Yeah,
if they come out of that, I mean, you come out of that 5-2, 6-1, somewhere like that, and then the back end is
the back end's tough. I mean, you're as much as Florida fans don't want to hear it. Like right now, that game against Florida State looks like a loss. The game at LSU looks like it is a loss. The obviously the game against Georgia is a loss. So now we're saying that's right now so much can happen between then and now, but I think those are going to be tough teams to beat, especially Georgia. And hey, if it's a rivalry though, I know of all those games, Florida fans will be holding out hope for that FSU one because if they they have like a 6-6 year, 7-5 year, but then FSU comes into the Swamp last game in the season, number 3, 4 in the country, and Florida plays spoiler. That's so we'll see if they can do it. Like you said, we'll find out early on what this team is like.
Yeah. All right, Zach. Thanks for joining me, man. This has been a lot of fun. Again, y'all can follow Zach's coverage for Florida. For On3 at Gators Online. Zach, this was really good. Thanks, man.
Absolutely, man. Will you be in Nashville?
I will not. I got a wedding. That's why I'm over here in San Antonio. I got a wedding, so
nice.
Won't be able to make the Nashville. And of course, LSU is on the first day, so it's literally it just doesn't work out. Doesn't work out.
Brian Kelly's kicking it off for us, man.
Yeah. So, but yeah, you're gonna be in Nashville.
I will. All
right,
I never turned down an opportunity to go to Nashville.
It's a motto to live by. It's a good motto to live by.
So, hey, man, this was fun. And we can revisit during the season, man.
For sure. Thanks, man.